Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Sustainable Materials Management webinar series, a joint effort between the National Recycling Coalition and the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. My name is Wayne Bowen. I'm the program manager for the Recycling Market Center and will serve as your moderator today. Before we get started with the presentations, we would like to extend a special thanks to Bob Hollis of the Mobius Network for providing the webinar management software for this series, and Savannah Batowski of the National Recycling Coalition for assisting the RMC with webinar promotion and technical support. Today's webinar topic is a follow-up to our July 17 webinar on plastic bag legislation. Today's presenters are Jennie Romer, Meri Soll, and Lillian Power, who I will introduce in a moment. Following the presentations, we will conduct a question and answer session. If you have a question or comment, please use the GoToWebinar dialog box located in the control panel on your screen. You may also use the dialog box to request assistance if you're experiencing technical difficulties during the webinar. Please note that an edited version of this webinar will be made available for viewing via YouTube links on the National Recycling Coalition and Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center websites. The presentation slides can also be obtained using the handout upload feature on your webinar control panel. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters. Jennie Romer is founder of plasticbaglaws.org, and she's a national expert on carryout bag policy whose knowledge is routinely sought by legislators, community groups, and businesses. Jennie earned her JD from Golden Gate University School of Law and is a member of the state bars of California and New York. She also holds a bachelor's degrees in zoology, environmental studies, and Black studies from UC Santa Barbara. Jennie was instrumental in San Francisco expanding its plastic bag ban and intimately involved with designing many local California bag laws. In 2012, Jennie moved to New York City and successfully coordinated a coalition in support of bag law that passed the New York City Council in 2016, but was blocked by the state legislature shortly before implementation in 2017. She currently works as an attorney, policy advisor, and sustainability consultant in New York City. Meri Soll is a senior program manager with StopWaste, the Alameda County Recycling Board and Waste Management Authority. Meri has worked for StopWaste for more than 20 years, managing a variety of programs, including the countywide Reusable Bag Ordinance, affecting retail and eating establishments. Additional responsibilities include managing the agency's construction and demolition debris program, as well as the grants program, which distributes funding to organizations conducting reuse, waste reduction, compost, and recycling projects. Meri holds a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Massachusetts. Lillian Power is an environmental protection specialist with the district's Department of Energy and Environment. She is responsible for implementing and enforcing the district's 5-cent bag fee, as well as the more recent ban on expanded polystyrene foam food serviceware. Lillian works to maintain strong enforcement programs by building relationships with the regulated community through compliance assistance and outreach, and educating the public about the positive impact these programs have on district waterways and communities. Previous to her current position in government, Lillian worked in both environmental education at local nonprofit and environmental research at the George Washington University, as well as Georgetown University. Lillian received her Bachelor of Science in Zoology from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and her MS in Biology from Georgetown University. So now I'm going to turn the program over to Jennie.
Hi, Wayne. Thanks a lot for hosting this webinar. And I'd also like to thank the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center and the National Recycling Coalition for agreeing to host. I presented on plastic bag laws as part of this series last year, and I suggested a follow-up webinar focusing on implementation enforcement now because so many jurisdictions have adopted laws recently, and I think there's a real need for discussion of implementation strategies and gathering efficacy data. Also, I'd like to note that I've given my website, plasticbaglaws.org, a bit of a makeover, and the primer page, which you can see on the slide here, features what I consider to be essential readings for jurisdictions and individuals that are first learning about bag laws. This page will soon feature implementation information, including a link to this webinar after it's posted. And I'm also working on a fact sheet that will include a lot of information on new efficacy data. So I am also working on a small, concise toolkit of US bag laws, and I'll be posting that in March. And I contributed to Upstream's Global Plastic Bag Toolkit, which will be released at the 6th International Marine Debris Conference next month. So I'll link to those toolkits on this page as well. So check back next month for all that exciting information. That's all for me. I've helped recruit Lillian and Meri to talk about their jurisdiction's robust implementation strategies, and I look forward to watching. Thank you. Lillian, you're up.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Jennie and Wayne. I'm just going to pop my screen up. All right, so as mentioned, my name is Lillian Power. I work for DC's Department of Energy and Environment. My primary responsibilities are implementing and enforcing DC's 5-cent bag fee, as well as the more recent ban on styrofoam food serviceware here in the city. Today, I'm basically going to talk to you a little bit about the motivation for our law, our 5-cent bag fee in particular, our initial implementation, our enforcement practices, as well as the impact of the law. So in terms of motivation for DC's 5-cent bag fee, our law was the first of its kind in the nation. And really the motivation behind it is one of our two rivers, the Anacostia River. Most people know of the larger river that runs through the district, which is the Potomac. There is a smaller river called the Anacostia that, as you can see, runs through northeast and southeast DC. And is, as also obvious, a very urban river. And as such, has had a history of issues with pollution, and trash is definitely part of that problem. So much so that the EPA actually created a total maximum daily load, or a TMDL, for trash, specifically in the Anacostia. It was the second river in the nation to get a TMDL specifically for trash. So we knew that it was a big issue, and in 2008, we aimed to actually quantify the issue, to really look at what the major types of trash were in the river. And as you can see here is some data from that 2008 study. What you're seeing is the types of trash, right? Categorized by, and the percent trash found in both the Anacostia main kind of river water column and its tributaries on the right. And as you can see, plastic bags are definitely one of the 4 most prevalent types of trash in the Anacostia, along with styrofoam, food wrappers, and bottles and cans. So this data really was our primary motivating factor for creating the 5-cent bag fee. Tommy Wells, who actually is our current the director of DOEE, he was previously a council member of in DC, and he was the council member responsible for creating the law, for proposing it to the council, which was passed actually unanimously. So going into the law itself, effective January 1st, 2010, basically any retailer in the district that sells food or alcohol, they must charge a 5-cent fee for any disposable bag, whether it be paper or plastic. There are a few exemptions to that fee, basically primarily being businesses that provide paper bags that have seating. So this is really dealing with your typical kind of sit-down restaurant where a customer might ask for a bag after the bill has already been settled. Restaurants were concerned, that they'd have to, do extra work to charge that extra fee. So an exemption was put in place for them. And also exemptions are in place for any plastic or paper bag that's used to bag bulk items like raw produce, baked goods, candy, nuts, wrapping frozen foods, meat, poultry, and fish, wrapping flowers, newspapers, laundry, garbage, pet waste, etc. So all of those items are exempt as well. So in terms of initial implementation, as I said, the effective date was January 1st, 2010. We basically spent the first 11 months, though, of that year focused entirely on outreach and compliance assistance. We did a variety of things. I'm only really highlighting a few of the major actions that we took. One of which was partnering with a few corporate sponsors here in DC to purchase and then distribute thousands of reusable bags to primarily targeting low-income and senior residents to make sure that they were both aware of the upcoming of the changes and were prepared with their own reusable bags if they chose not to opt into the fee. We also sent mailers to all regulated businesses. We have at this point in time, I think between 5,000 and 6,000 regulated entities in the district. So everybody got a mailer. And we also made sure that we were sending advertisements out through print media, online media, radio, bus shelters, buses. We wanted to make sure that the residents as well as the businesses were aware of the changes since it was impacting both communities. And then we also created a variety of educational materials, one of which I'm highlighting on the right here is this sticker that we created. And essentially, it was created for businesses to put on their counter or on their window, basically explaining the fee. So if a customer was confused or upset about charging a fee, they could have a resource just directly available to point to and say, you know, it's the law, we're required to do this. If you want more information, you know, there's a website right here. And that's actually been very, very successful. We've had a lot of really positive feedback about this sticker. So continuing on initial implementation, we did begin enforcing in December of 2010. And prior to that, we did do like door-to-door inspections, but they really were, it was more door-to-door outreach where we were talking to businesses. If they were not in compliance, we were more, you know, talking to them about what they need to do to come into compliance rather than actually enforcing against them. We also took in the data from the first 6 months of since the effective date, including the bag fee revenue and the number of bags that had been used in those first 6 months to really report and announce the initial kind of implementation of the law. So there's a second major component to the bag law, aside from just charging the fee. We actually, the law created a specific fund for those fees to be remitted into called the Anacostia Cleanup and Protection Fund, which I'll refer to as the fund from here on out. And really, the fund was in the law required to be used specifically for environmental purposes, for cleaning up the Anacostia watershed and river, as well as like DC's other waterways, but with a real focus on the Anacostia. So as I mentioned, right, businesses are responsible for remitting their fees. They're responsible for remitting 4 cents of every 5 cents that they charge to the Office of Tax and Revenue, or OTR, here in DC. There are businesses that choose to participate in our carryout bag credit program, which allows them to keep 2 cents of every 5 cents that they collect, but they're required to give back 5 cents to any customer that comes in with a reusable bag. These fees are deposited into the special fund, the Anacostia Cleanup and Protection Fund, which is administered by DOEE. And just to give you an idea in terms of how much money we see coming in FY17, which was October 2016 to September 2017, we saw roughly $200,000 per month being remitted in fees. So the way it works for DC is businesses just remit. It's an extra line item on their sales and use tax return forms. So as you can see, kind of highlighted number 11, right, disposable carryout bag fee. They basically put in how much money that they're remitting right there. And then the Office of Tax and Revenue collects those fees, remits them, and is actually also responsible for remitting into the fund from a few other sources. We also have the DC Anacostia license plate. Purchases of that license plate, part of the proceeds go to the fund, as well as people can make voluntary contributions on their tax returns. So looking at the actual fees remitted per year, as you can see, we've got the total fees remitted between 2010 and 2016. And as you can see, it does increase over time. And I do want to just make the point here that we do not believe that it is increasing because there's an increase in bag usage. It's more that there are more businesses that are coming into compliance every year. And I'm going to show you our compliance rate in a few slides, and you'll see that it reflects the same trends that we're seeing in our remittance rates, our yearly remittance rates. And it's also important to mention that DC as a city has been expanding rapidly, both in terms of the number of regulated businesses and population. So that increase in remitted fees is probably an outcome of that increase as well. So just to give you a few examples of the projects that have been funded by bag law, we've done multiple stream restorations throughout the city. There are now 7 trash traps that are located along tributaries to the Anacostia that actually capture floating trash like bottles and cans right before they hit the water column. We also fund, there's a relatively new program called DC River Explorers that funds free boat trips for any district resident that is interested in going out on the Anacostia and seeing what it's like and learning about the history and the programs that are in place to improve its health. We also fund educational programs, overnight meaningful watershed educational experiences for 5th graders are funded through this program. We also continue just to distribute thousands of reusable bags every year that is funded by the bag fee. So this is just kind of a few examples, but we have a wide variety of programs that we fund regularly, all with the aim to improve the health of the Anacostia River. So getting into actual enforcement, DOEE inspects a minimum of 550 businesses every year. We actually go in and we anonymously go into a business. We will purchase something. We will ask for a bag, and then we'll, if the business charges for that bag, and they should be charging for that bag, then they are in compliance. If not, then they're in violation. We have a pretty specific protocol for determining like the location that we inspect. As you can see to the right, there's a map of DC here, and it's divided up into what we call advisory neighborhood commissions, so kind of local neighborhood district lines. And the number of times we visit each ANC each year is dependent on the number of regulated businesses within that ANC. So, for example, wards 1 and 2, the ANCs in wards 1 and 2, kind of all in this central cluster here, 50% of all of our businesses are regulated businesses are in wards 1 and 2. So we end up in wards 1 and 2 a lot, 50% of the time, to make sure that we're visiting these locations based on, you know, the number of businesses that actually exist there. In addition to just actual inspections, you know, random assignments and inspections, we also regularly solicit tips from the public. There's the 311 app. Anybody can put in a tip for a business through 311. There's also a tip line through our bag site. And we regularly also take tips from the people that call or email us, or even in person. So I think last year we had about like 25 bag law tips, all of which we followed up on in addition to our assignments. So when we find a business that is in violation, the way DC does things is the first time a business is in violation, we issue an official warning letter called a notice of violation. And from there on out, we issue fines anywhere between $100 and $400, and the amount of the fine is dependent on the number of previous violations. So as you can see here, the second violation is 100, third 200, fourth 400. We're actually currently updating our regulations that will increase the potential fine amount to $800. And as of right now, fines reset in the calendar year, so January 1st. NOVs are always in place, but the fine amounts reset from one year to the next. So looking at our compliance rate, as I mentioned, has steadily increased over time. FY17, we saw more than 3/4 of the businesses inspected were in compliance. So we are very pleased with that outcome. We do see this as a positive sign that businesses are taking this seriously. They are continually aware of the requirement. Of course, it does require kind of constant inspection and enforcement, but we're seeing positive results from those efforts. So looking at just a little bit of the impact of the law itself, in 2013, DOEE commissioned a survey to measure the impact of the law on disposable bag usage rates, both for residents and businesses in the district. And through that survey, residents reported using 80% fewer bags. So that's a great reduction. For businesses, businesses actually reported a median 50% reduction in the number of bags that they purchased. And asking them just about how they view the law, has the law impacted their business positively or negatively? They actually reported the majority reported either neutral or positive effect on their business. So this was a really important kind of outcome for us, because there was a lot of concern from businesses prior to the law being the effective date of the law, that it would negatively impact their business, and that doesn't seem to really be the case. So that's really great. In terms of actually how the law has impacted grocery bags or plastic bags in our waterways, we partner closely with the Alice Ferguson Foundation, which is a local nonprofit that works to clean up the Potomac watershed in particular. And they do a lot of cleanup events, one big one in particular every April. And they actually reported a 72% decrease in the number of plastic bags that they saw in during their cleanup events compared to before the fee was in effect. So we are seeing fewer plastic bags in our waterways as well. So with that, that's pretty much the overview of DC's implementation and enforcement. And with that, we'll throw it back to Jennie or Wayne in terms of whether we take questions now or wait for Meri.
Okay, thank you,
Lillian.
Yep.
I think we talked about listening to both of your webinars before moving on to the questions.
Great.
Meri might have some answers to some of the questions that were raised in people's minds. So Meri, we're gonna move right along to you, and then we'll have all the questions right at the end.
Okay, sounds great. And I see some similarities and some differences from our ordinance, so it'll be interesting to hear from both sides. My name is Meri Soll. I'm a senior program manager here at StopWaste. We are located in Alameda County, California. So for me, I'm going to say good morning, but I think for most of you, it's really good afternoon. I'm not sure how many folks know where Alameda County is, so just a brief overview. We are east of San Francisco. There's 14 cities in our county, over 820 square miles, and we have over 1.6 million residences living here in our county. My colleague told me we're greater population-wise than 10 states. I didn't believe him. I looked it up. We actually have more population than 12 states in the United States. So our policies and laws do have a great impact here in the Bay Area. As you can see by the map, on the west part of our county, they all line up on the bay. And so plastic pollution, specifically single-use plastic bags, is something that our constituents wanted to get a handle on. Just a teeny bit about who we are. I'm not going to talk too much about our agency, but it does help give you the lay of the land. Our official name is the Alameda County Waste Management Authority, Source Reduction and Recycling Board and Energy Council. That is quite a mouthful, and so we just go by our DBA StopWaste, which really resonates with the community, as that is our goal, to reduce the amount of waste that goes to landfill, waste less, reuse, and recycle more. So that's just a little bit of information. We have many programs to help reduce the amount of waste for schools, for businesses and residences. StopWaste.org if you're interested in learning more about our other programs, but today I'm going to focus on our county-wide reusable bag law. The Alameda County Waste Management Authority is the entity that has the power to pass laws. It is a board of 17 members, all elected officials from the cities, the sanitary districts, as well as the county. We're funded by per ton disposal. We have waste import mitigation fees. And for this particular project, we partnered with the Alameda County Clean Water Program, providing $180,000 towards the expansion of activities. It was a one-time contribution, but since their mission is to clean up the water, this particular project and law was very resonant with them. I don't really need to talk about the reasons why we have an ordinance. I think Lillian did a great job of that. We just want to show a campy picture of what we call our bag monster. Chico Bag is a California-based manufacturer of reusable bags, and they estimate that one shopper in 1 year uses about 500 single-use plastic bags, and that's a very powerful tool at schools and conferences, and actually even at board meetings. We created our bag law mostly to reduce the litter in our local waterways and also to promote reusable bags, since we are a waste reduction agency, and partnering with the Clean Water Program to help cities meet their trash load requirements. We had similar requirements to the Bay Area Water Quality Management District to clean up the creeks and the rivers and the bay here in the Bay Area, and this ordinance helped those cities achieve some reduction. So a little bit about how we came up with our reusable bag law requirements or affected stores. In 2012, we conducted an environmental impact report and estimated about 764 million single-use plastic bags were being distributed every year in our county. So I mentioned we're a very large, populous county. And the EIR estimated about the lion's share, 62%, were coming from stores that sold packaged food, your grocery stores, your big box stores that sold food at the stores, convenience stores, liquor stores, those types of things. And so that was our original focus, and then the remainder being restaurants and retail stores that distributed the remaining single-use bags. That's a formula that the EIR consultant came up with using a population-based formula, 1.4 bags for every resident every day in Alameda County. That's the formula. So in 2012, the Waste Management Authority Board adopted a reusable bag law that just affected stores that sold packaged food and liquor, about 1,300 stores. The ordinance was very successful. I'll go over that in a little bit. And they did expand the ordinance to affect all retail stores and eating establishments in the county. So right now there are 14,000 entities affected by our reusable bag law. Basically, if you walk into a store or a restaurant or eat at a food truck, they are affected by our reusable bag law. So what are the requirements? So we are a little bit different than Lillian's ordinance that she described. We have different requirements for our retail stores and for our eating establishments. Our retail stores, nobody, either eating establishment or retail stores, can distribute single-use plastic bags at point of purchase. So the retail stores became affected May 1, 2017. We phased in the expansion just with so many stores. We needed to make sure we took our time. So the retail stores went first. May 1st, they were affected. They are required to charge 10 cents for a paper bag or a compliant thick reusable plastic bag. And I can go over the requirements in a little bit. The difference with our ordinance is that the stores keep the cent charge. It's not subject to sales tax, and the stores keep the charge to help them implement the ordinance. We have similar exemptions. Any plastic bag that does not have a handle, that's used for protection or transport produce, or bulk foods are not charged 10 cents. They are exempt from the law. This is probably 101 what not to do with your PowerPoint, but I just wanted to give the audience an idea of how we are outreaching to let folks know about ordinance compliance. And this compliance tip for retailers on our website. We used the previous slide here. This was just an excerpt of a flyer that we sent out, and this also we sent. And so we're working with the retail stores. We were told some people just need a snapshot of what's required and others need more details. So we provided both to them to let them know what they needed to do to be compliant with the law. Eating establishments have different requirements. They too are not allowed to give out any single-use plastic bags. We phased them in just a couple of months ago, November 1, 2017. The difference is they do not need to charge for paper bags. And one of the reasons why we gave this exemption to the eating industry is doing our outreach, working with restaurant associations, and also seeing what other neighboring counties and cities had, if they had an eating establishment that was affected by their reusable bag law. What we found is that, especially the takeout, they felt the law was penalizing them as an industry, that most of the food is already packaged in the back of the house, to-go orders. It's almost impossible to change a consumer behavior. And if they were just giving out paper bags that are readily compostable and recyclable here in Alameda County, why make them charge for it? And if the goal was to reduce single-use plastic or plastic in general, then paper bags should be allowed to be distributed for free. And we agreed, so there is no charge for paper bags. Same thing with protective plastic bags for your soups and stews. However, if an eating establishment feels that the only way that they can distribute their food is in a plastic bag, it needs to be a thick, compliant, durable, reusable plastic bag, and they must charge 10 cents and put that charge on the receipt. So those are the nuances and the differences between the eating establishments and the retail stores. So talking a little bit about how we implemented the expansion, because it was 14,000 stores all of a sudden that we were regulating instead of 1,300. We did several outreach campaigns. We sent letters 2 times, 6 months before the ordinance became effective, and then 2 months to remind them, use up your single-use bags. Here's where you can get compliant bags. For restaurants, just switch to paper. That's the easiest thing for you to be compliant. We had outreach materials similar to what Lillian shared. This was things that they could put on their cash register to let folks know this is our law, not the retail store's law or the eating establishment's law. We translated into 3 different languages, Mandarin, Spanish, and obviously English. And we have many different languages spoken here in our diverse county. And we also hired a part-time outreach associate to provide technical assistance. She's been in the field for a year, and she's basically going to all restaurants and eating and retail stores and checking in on them to see if they're compliant, and providing assistance if they're not. So I mentioned that the ordinance expanded, and that one of the main reasons for expansions that had been quite successful was just stores that sold packaged food and liquor and grocery stores, and our board had wanted to look into expanding the ordinance to a larger set of stores. We have a couple of metrics that we use to assess if the ordinance was successful, what we're calling parking lot surveys, basically counting customers coming out of the store for an hour, seeing the types and the amounts of bags, did they have a bag, did they bring their own, as well as some bag purchasing data. So a little bit similar and different to what Lillian shared with us. So our original ordinance, as I mentioned, your supermarkets, stores that sell packaged food, we've been tracking that data since the year before the ordinance went into effect all the way through current year. And so what we found was in 2012, that was 1 year before the ordinance went into effect, we spent an hour at about 20 different stores in Alameda County and counted the number and types of bags. And that big red bar on your left, that very first bar, that's the number of bags that were counted at 20 stores in 1 hour. 5 years later, you can see that blue bar, it's practically gone all the way down to less than a couple of hundred. We are allowed to distribute single durable compliant plastic bags, but it's a very small number compared to what it was before the ordinance went into effect. An 87% drop, which I believe is pretty similar to what Lillian was showing. 37% fewer paper bags, and so the huge amount of single-use bags was not simply replaced with paper bags. That dropped as well. And then the same metrics, I believe, that Lillian had, 80% people just bringing their own bags. And the last item, people not taking a bag, that really shocked us. So the last bar on the right, such an increase in folks not taking any type of bag. And that really made us realize the ordinance gives people pause. When a cashier says, do you need a bag for 10 cents? Makes people think, do I need a bag for my milk carton or my 6-pack? Or these 2 items for 10 cents? And the answer often is no. So we were really pleased to see that the ordinance had been effective, giving folks pause, bringing their own or not taking one. We also were able to reach out to 5 major chains here in Alameda County, your big box stores, convenience stores, drug stores, and we asked them for their bag purchasing data. For 1 year before the ordinance and then every year after. So it's been the same chain stores, about 70 total stores here in Alameda County. That very first year before the ordinance went into effect, the big bar on the left where it says 2012 bag purchasing showed that 50 million bags were purchased for these 70 stores the year before the ordinance went into effect. 1 year later, that number dropped to just 8 million and no plastic bags were purchased. As the years have gone on, that number stayed about the same. It's creeping up a little bit, and you'll notice the last 2 bars on the right where the green is. Some of the big box stores now provide durable, reusable plastic bags for sale, and it's creeping up a little bit. It's still nothing near what it was prior to the ordinance, but some of the big box chains have figured out how to financially make those thicker, durable, compliant bags pencil out. Some charge 10 cents, some even charge 25 cents, which is allowed, but still a very huge reduction. So the ordinance has been successful in bag purchasing by stores, as well as changing consumer behavior, which really resonates the same with the information that Lillian had shared. But do we know that the ordinance has been effective for the stores that have been recently expanded to, your retail stores? And so we did the same parking lot survey before the ordinance went into effect, and then we just recently did it. It's not even really a year's worth of data, because these retail stores, and think about your Kohl's and your Ross and your sporting goods stores, your craft stores, big box stores, that's where we spent an hour checking out the number of bags and the types of bags coming out, and then we did it again this year. And what we're finding is the same thing, trending in the right direction. Fewer paper and plastic bags being distributed at point of purchase, more people bringing their own bags, 90% more, and 30% more shoppers just not taking a bag. So it is successful, even with the expansion, not quite the huge change that it was for the stores that sold packaged food, but we knew that at 65% almost of single-use bags distributed come from that packaged food sector. But still, reduction in single-use bags and people bringing their own, that's the goal of the ordinance. I know that we're talking a little bit about the focus is for enforcement and implementation. So a little bit about how we are enforcing. When we only had 1,300 stores when the ordinance originally passed, we inspected every single store for compliance, and we found about an 89% compliance rate. With 14,000 stores, there's no way we can visit them all. And so we are moving towards a complaint-based ordinance, utilizing our outreach assistant in the field, the general public, and staff to fill out a very easy non-compliance reporting form that's on our website, and letting us know so we can go out and inspect. We have done some inspections. As I mentioned, we phased in our approach. So November 2017 are when the retail stores became affected by the law. It hasn't been 8 months, and we've given both entities a 6-month grace period to come into compliance before we would actually do any inspections or have any enforcement activities. So today we've only had 73 complaints, most of which are coming from our field inspections. 64 stores were inspected because many of them either were out of business or closed, and we're finding about maybe half of them actually had some enforcement actions, meaning they're still giving out single-use plastic bags, they're not charging for their bags, or they're not itemizing the charge on the receipt. Those are when they would receive a violation. We have not done this with eating establishments because they haven't been affected by the law for 6 months, but we will start in May. And we seem to be getting a lot more complaints, as you can see already, from the eating establishments, even though they're a fairly small slice of the pie when it comes to distributing single-use bags. They really love the single-use bags for food distribution, and we can go into that in a little bit. So very similar to Lillian's approach, where she described how they enforce, we do almost the same thing. We also have our fines are the same, 100, 200, and then 400 for the first, second, and third. If they're found compliant, we don't go back. If they're not found compliant, they'll get a letter, they'll get a warning, and then eventually they'll get a citation. We utilize contract inspectors. We have a large mandatory recycling ordinance that affects all businesses and multifamily dwellings in Alameda County, and they inspect all of those entities. And so we roll the reusable bag law ordinance inspections when the field inspectors are out for the other ordinance. So it's kind of combined. Some things that we've noticed in the field, so we've based all of our outreach and approach on what we knew from the originally affected stores, the food package stores, and the grocery stores and the drug stores. They put our signage up right away. They wanted to make sure the consumers knew this is not our law, this is the county law, and we still have to charge for it. The retail stores are much less apt to do that. They're reluctant to charge. It seems to be if someone's buying a $300 watch, do I really have to charge 10 cents for the bag? Or a super expensive down coat, I feel sheepish requiring 10 cents for the bag. And also there's just a lack of consumer awareness. The eating establishments, it's only been a couple of months, but we're noticing a really high turnover in the restaurant industry. A store that was notified last year of the ordinance, they're no longer in business. The new store didn't get the information. There's a lot of language barriers. We have many ethnic restaurants, and so we can't translate all of our materials, so that's been a little bit difficult. And as I mentioned, many are just still using up their single-use plastic bags, and they really like them for ease of putting the containers in. I don't know if Lillian's dealt with this, but we have a lot of delivery services here in the Bay Area, your Uber Eats, your DoorDash, and there's a lot of confusion on who charges and where they charge for the bag and who needs to assess which bag could be distributed. So we're working on that, but food delivery, third-party food delivery is really big here, and something we're working on, identifying ways to make sure everyone's compliant. And then just kind of a point of interest, we have been notified and actually met with this manufacturer of tamper-resistant bags for these third-party delivery services to ensure that the restaurant and the delivery service is not held harm if something should go wrong with the food. So these are bags that are sealed tight and you have to rip them open to get the bag out. The manufacturer likens it to the Tylenol scare of many years ago, which started, the sealing of the medicines, and he feels this is the next big thing that will happen. We're hoping not. They're not reusable, they're not recyclable, and so just something we never envisioned when we put the ordinance together. As I mentioned, a lot of consumers are not aware of the ordinance, and so we're reaching out via our social media. We don't have a huge following on Facebook, but we are starting to post our ordinances and boost them and pay for advertisements to get the word out. What seems to resonate, the most popular posts that are being retweeted and reposted are items that show fouling the ocean and the waterways and wildlife eating plastic. So we're trying to use that as a message, just skip the plastic altogether, bring your own bag, or don't take one. The studies that show that by 2050, there'll be more plastic in the water than fish really also seems to wake up the consumers, and we're gonna move forward with that outreach. Why, maybe the people don't really care about the bag law, but they really seem to care about the waterways and the fish. And with that, I have completed my presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Wayne for questions from the group.
Okay. First, Jennie, do you have anything to add?
Nope, I think that was exactly what I was hoping. So thanks so much to both of you.
Okay. All right. Well, great presentations, everybody. So now we're going to field some questions for our presenters. Again, if you have a question, please enter them into the GoToWebinar dialog box. During Lillian's presentation, we got quite a few questions in, so I will let Lillian go first to answer the question, and then Meri, if you want to answer the question if it does pertain to your program, and then Jennie, if you have any comment, you could you can be last and for the question. So the first one here is, so what kind of plastic bag is allowed to be used by businesses, i.e. how many millimeters thick? Is there a ban on the typical carry-out lightweight bag?
Yeah, hi. So for plastic, they must be made out of HDPE or LDPE, and I think it's 2 millimeters thick. But I'd have to check back on that into the original law. So it's your very typical, disposable plastic bag. In terms of paper, it's any paper with 40% post-consumer content. So those are our requirements for the two materials.
I can jump in there. For our compliant reusable bag, it's deemed compliant if it can meet the minimum lifetime of 125 uses, and we define a use as carrying 22 pounds 125 times over a distance of 175 feet. It needs to be 2.2 mil thick, so it's much thicker than your single-use lightweight bags, and be 15 liters wide and cannot contain any chemicals. We have a protocol on our website that we've asked manufacturers to utilize to test their bags so that stores distributing them can know that they're using compliant, reusable, durable, thicker bags. And we've found that the thicker bags don't fly as much and tend to be found less in waterways.
Yeah, sorry, that was for the disposable bags too, that definition. For DC.
Yeah, and for DC, I believe it's 2.25 milliinches. I'm bringing up the law right now. But generally, for most jurisdictions, the thickness of plastic film is measured in mils, that's millinches, and it's generally 2.25. A couple of jurisdictions, yeah, I'm looking right now, DC is 2.25. It does say millimeters in the DC law, but a lot of ordinances say that, but generally they mean millinches, MILS. Some laws don't get it quite right in the ordinance because it's not a measurement that anyone uses for anything else, basically. But 2.25 is mils is standard in the U.S. A couple of places have gone up to 4.0 in Austin, Texas, and I believe a couple places in Oregon. Where then you kind of have to balance out there. You're using more petroleum or you're using more plastic to create those thicker reusable bags if the higher you go up in thickness, but you're also seeing that they're much less likely to blow around in the wind. They are also more expensive. So kind of those are the factors that are usually weighed, and most places end up with the 2.25 mils.
All right, thanks, Jenny. Okay, I think this might have been addressed, but I will pose it anyway. Do you send inspectors back regularly after violation charges are issued?
We do. So at StopWaste, if someone's inspected and not found compliant, no sooner than 120 days, we give them some time to compliant, would we go back? And then if they're still found in violation, we'll go back and no sooner than another 120 days. So we continue to go back until they're compliant. The goal of enforcement is to bring them into compliance, not to give them citations.
For DC, yes, we definitely do regularly go back to reinspect. I will mention, obviously, like our ordinance is slightly different. I mean, is actually considerably different from Meri's and Alameda's. In that, ours is based on kind of the behavior of the cashier. So, depending on time of day and the cashier present, like a business could be in compliance or could not be in compliance. So when we go out for an assignment, we will absolutely look up, the businesses in that assignment that have previous violations, that have never been inspected, that haven't been inspected in a long time, and that information will help shape our inspection schedule of the assignment.
Okay, again, this question may have been addressed to some degree. How was the survey conducted for residents and businesses?
Yeah, so basically I would have to look up the the specifics on it, but essentially I think it was just a random phone survey conducted for both businesses and for residents. I think it was about 800 people were interviewed, but I would have to double check on that. But essentially, it was a phone interview, random survey for residents and businesses.
Okay, anything else? Okay, what is the impact on low-income residents when you impose plastic bag fees in stores and other retail locations?
So this is Meri from StopWaste. So we have left it up to the stores. It is their decision if someone presents themselves as using food stamps. It's called WIC and SNAP here. It is up to the store to decide if they want to charge that customer for a bag or not. So we leave that up to the store. It's not required to not charge, but we leave it up to the store to make that decision. That's how we deal with the low-income bag charges. And it seems to be that most of the stores do not charge for the SNAP and the WIC customers for the bags.
For DC, while we don't provide an exemption based on socioeconomic status or whether people are using SNAP benefits or not, we do. That's why we have this big push. We purchase about 50,000 reusable bags every year and distribute them primarily through local nonprofits, through our DC Office on Aging, our housing department, to make sure that we're getting the bags out to those that probably need them the most. So that's really been our big push from the district.
Right, and I think this is Jennie. I think the study that you mentioned earlier also showed that this law was effective and popular across income levels. And so I think, Wayne, I think we can send you a link to that study as well. So it goes into detail about how that information was collected. So I think that people will find that useful.
Okay, thank you. How much time does it take to do enforcement? How much staff? What's the budget? And was there internal pushback to do enforcement?
I can start. So at StopWaste, for the reusable bag ordinance, we have a $10,000 add-in contract to the bigger inspectors to do enforcement as well as to do those parking lot surveys, and so that takes some time. So we have about 5,000, 6,000 budgeted for inspections. They estimate an inspection takes about 40 minutes. Well, because it depends on the store. Sometimes an inspector will kind of hang out front and see what people are coming out with bag-wise, because once they present themselves, sometimes the stores change their tune, or they give out, they have bags they shouldn't be giving out and bags that they should be giving out. So it takes about half hour to 40 minutes per an inspection. We are actually as I mentioned, all stores were inspected, and that was part of a board directive. So we are going back to our board actually tomorrow to discuss some of the initial findings of inspections. There was some concerns that relying on the public would not suffice, and so we may entertain doing some random inspections or spot inspections or a minimum percentage of stores inspected every year. And so I think it's the inspections need to really make the stores come in compliance. Doing 1 or 2 inspections in an area, specifically around here, like we have several Chinatowns in different cities, and Koreatowns in different ethnic areas, and it seems that if there's 1 or 2 inspections, the stores start talking to each other, and then they bring themselves into compliance. So we found inspections really do work and help bring into compliance.
For DC, we do have a team of 4 inspectors essentially, though I will say the team is not just inspectors. We are responsible for all things implementation and enforcement, not only for bag law, but also for, as I mentioned, the foam ban and a third law that we have here, which is the coal tar pavement sealant ban. So we work on all 3 programs. So So I would say we basically have the equivalent of maybe one full-time employee that works on inspections and bag law stuff. When it comes to just pure inspections, it's probably even less than one full-time employee. Each of us spend considerably less than 25, I would say 15 to 20% of our time on inspections. Just breaking down those ANCs and the 550 inspections per year, that basically requires each inspector to visit seven different neighborhoods per quarter. So it's pretty much a weekly thing where we'll go out to one ANC and visit 5 businesses within that ANC. So while the processing takes, you know, maybe like 3 hours, 4 hours in addition to those 2 to 3 hours, it's probably the equivalent of, you know, 1 day a week maybe that is dedicated purely to our inspection protocols.
Okay, this one's specifically for Lillian. What is DC doing to increase the enforcement of litter laws? And they're citing the data on the higher percentage of bottles versus bags in the DC area.
Yeah, so when it comes to litter laws, we're actually, that's slightly outside of my immediate wheelhouse, but I will say that DC has recently become particularly interested in getting the word out in terms less in terms of enforcement and more in terms of outreach and education when it comes to litter. So there likely will be kind of a public rollout in terms of a litter campaign in the next few months that you'll see that's district specific. We also do here at DOE, we have a grant that's given to the Alice Ferguson Foundation to specifically work with communities and businesses and community organizers and, you know, particularly motivated residents to spread the word on anti-litter and to, you know, promote anti-littering behavior here in the city. So it's, in terms of enforcement, I think that's more of a MPD issue, but for us, we're really working on outreach and education right now. And sorry, Wayne, what was the second component of that question?
That's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just mention the bottles. I think on one of your slides, the bottles were shown to be a higher percentage.
Right. Yeah. No. Absolutely. So bottles are still an issue in in the river and its tributaries, and it's something that we're still thinking through, and you know, it's a work in progress, I would say.
Okay. How do you verify / manage stores who do not have sophisticated cash registers that can show the fee is applied to the purchase?
So this is Meri at StopWaste. We allow stores to do it old-fashioned. They can write it on the receipt. They can tally the bags, however it works for them. Most of the cash registers that are unable to be, I guess what they call recalculated to include the bag charge, you can simply write it on the receipt.
Same thing here in DC. One thing that we've seen pretty commonly in kind of the smaller kind of corner stores and mom and pop shops is they'll just put kind of a barcode sticker right on their cash register that they scan whenever they issue a bag. So it's pretty straightforward for even the like simplest of cash registers. And we also allow for just writing on, you know, those 10 cents if that's, or sorry, those 5 cents if that's the easiest thing for them.
And just to follow up, you know, we've worked with some of the cash register companies, and the easiest thing for a small Tiandra to do is just to do a miscellaneous charge. It doesn't have to say bag charge as long as they're asking them, you want a bag for 10 cents. And to note that the smaller stores that we have found anecdotally really like the reusable bag law, because what they were finding is someone would come in and get a soda and a bag of chips, They want a bag, they take the bag with the soda and chips, walk outside, drink the soda, eat the chips, and throw it on the ground, or sometimes they would miss the trash bag, and it was really driving the store owners crazy. And so with the 10 cents charge, they weren't taking the bags anymore, less litter, less cost for the store. And we were surprised because we had thought that the small business owners would be the ones that may be adversely impacted with bag charges or being able to comply with the law for charging on receipts via the cash register.
Okay, with the reusable bags, how do you address the cleanliness concerns?
So we have, this is Meri at StopWaste. On our website, we have a whole section on maintaining your reusable bags, and we kind of liken it, you know, every time you wash your socks and if you're wash your bags, especially if you've taken home meats. Those are the times that you really should be washing your bag, and so we've addressed it that way, letting consumers know how to take care and maintain a healthy, reusable bag. They wash them like you do your socks and underwear. Wash them.
Okay, there's a follow-up to that. How do you ensure the reusable bags are actually being reused, and are you concerned about these bags getting into the environment?
So this is Meri at StopWaste. Yes, I mean the reusable bags are thick enough and can be reused multiple times. I think the question is, are they being reused? And that's really difficult to assess when we're in the field, especially when we do the parking lot surveys. We do notate if someone's bringing, you know, a plastic bag that's obviously being reused either from another store or more than one time. They see it sometimes, not as often. What we're finding from the folks out in the field, especially from our transfer stations and from the landfills, that they are seeing less plastic bags littering what they call their fence. You know, it's super windy and they need to put fences up to trap the bags. They're seeing less plastic bags in general, and the thicker bags, not nearly as many as they used to see with a single-use bag. So it's impossible to assess if people are really reusing them over and over. But we see that there's just less of them for sure than the single-use bags were ever, because they're more expensive, and people seem to think of them as something they just wouldn't throw out because they're thicker and can be reused.
I'll mirror Meri's sentiments there. I mean, it would be really hard for us to really quantify, you know, the number of times the bags that we distribute are being reused. What we do know is that, like, the bags that we do distribute are made out of 100% recycled material, they're durable, and that they are of a considerably higher quality than the disposable bags. So having those out there in the community as an alternative option is a positive benefit, and we just hope that people are continuing to use them.
Right. This is Jennie. I'd just like to add to that. So, you know, one of the reasons I got involved with, or really involved with bag laws, was in San Francisco under the original ban when the thicker plastic bags were being given away for free. People weren't really paying as much attention to whether they needed them. But we've seen that when jurisdictions start applying a minimum charge to the thicker plastic bags that qualify as reusable, the overall use goes down dramatically. And so I think, you know, the plastic bags are still available, the thicker ones, but people pay a lot more attention to whether they need them or not, and then find things to do with them after. That's just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Okay, while you're speaking, Jennie, this question's for you. It kind of a little off pace a little bit. Any suggestions on fighting a ban on bans? Example is Missouri is proposing a ban on any bans by local jurisdictions, which that's like a preemption law.
Right. I'm working on hopefully a resource for that with some other with some nonprofits that have been working on the preemption issue. So check back on my primer page next month. Hopefully that will be included as part of the toolkit that I mentioned. So this is something that we're seeing in a lot of states. I just read about it in Utah today. where we're having laws be introduced that would would make local bag laws illegal, would preempt all local bag laws. And so there's a lawsuit about that in Texas right now. Several states are considering it. So it's really important. We talked about the efficacy information today, especially with Meri. When states have bag laws in effect, to be sure to collect information before and after the law goes into effect to show whether that law is effective, so you can really talk to your legislators and in a way to show that law is working, and if it's not, to figure out how to fix it. But really, getting the information to the state legislators, and not just concentrate on what's going on at the local level with your local legislators, but also make sure that your state legislators realize that this is an issue that people care about. And so I think that's really an important thing to do.
Okay, this question is for Lillian. When the initial Anacostia studies were performed, as well as any AFF follow-up studies, are plastic retail bags separated from other plastic bags and film, or are they all grouped together?
That's a good question. I believe that the plastic bag bar that you saw on those graphs were purely your typical disposable carryout bag. So films were not wrapped into that. We do considerable trash monitoring now through both our trash traps and the tributaries and the water column itself. And I do believe that one of the 22 types of trash that is accounted for does include wraps and films. But in that specific study, it's your typical kind of grocery bag.
Okay. Now this is a question for everybody. Do you see plastic and paper bags as equally problematic, or are paper bags seen better than plastic, and for what reasons?
I'll say from our perspective. So obviously the authority to enforce the 5-cent bag fee was given to the Department of Energy and Environment, and I'm in the Watershed Protection Division. So our primary goal here is to protect our waterways. So from that specific angle, paper bags are better than plastic bags. They do decompose when they hit our streams and rivers. So that's why when you see exemptions for paper, the exemption for paper bags in our legislation, that's really the motivation behind it. Because from that perspective, yes, we see paper bags as better than plastic bags, and that's why we allow for them more than plastic.
This is Meri from StopWaste. There's so many different ways to look at better and what's better. I think it depends on who's looking at it, and from, just as Lillian mentioned, from a water perspective, we try and look at it from a waste reduction perspective. The paper bags here are compostable as well as recyclable. That is not the same with any plastic bag, although in theory the plastic bags can be recycled. They tend to jam up the recycling equipment. Most folks do not end up recycling them. Sometimes they escape. So from a waste prevention and a waste recycling approach, the paper bags are more preferable. That's why we don't charge for them. We allow the restaurants not to charge for them. But I think it depends on also your greenhouse gas studies. We've done a lot of those, and it really depends on who's conducting the study. So it's difficult to assess, from a life cycle analysis, which one is better. But from a waste prevention and recycling and reuse approach, we prefer the paper. And again, we are right here on the bay, and papers don't litter the waterways. They decompose. They don't stay there forever. And there's no studies that show there's more paper in the ocean than fish. So we prefer the paper bags over the plastic from a waste prevention and environmental standpoint.
Okay,
this is Jennie. I'll just add 2 cents. I just think that it's important to address all bags. We call these plastic bag laws because plastics tend to be the bigger problem, particularly because they end up as windblown litter. But it's important to address all bag types. So I think the type of law that has either a ban on all, or ban on bags plus, ban on thin plastic bags plus a charge on all others, or just a fee on all carryout bags really make the most sense, where we see the biggest difference. We don't have to argue as much paper versus plastic. We can just see an overall reduction.
Okay, great. We have time for just one more question here. What is the biggest obstacle faced in passing plastic bag legislation, and how did it shape the final ordinance? Anybody?
I'll start from Meri from StopWaste. So, we did not have, when we first passed the ordinance in 2012, I didn't lead the project, but I was involved with it. What we found really helped move forward, so maybe it's not so much what were the obstacles, but what maybe prevented some obstacles, was we had the support from the Grocers Association from the get-go, and they were the ones that would be most affected by the ordinance. And what their concern was a level playing field. Just don't affect the big stores. It needs to affect everyone, from the small stores up to the big grocery stores. Some ordinances that we have seen really only affect like the big stores. And so we took that information to heart and made sure that we were affecting everyone a level playing field. And the other thing that we did when crafting the original ordinance was to see what was out there ordinance-wise and what wasn't met with any legal ramifications. So the city of Oakland, which is a city here in our county, many years ago, before our ordinance had passed, tried to pass their own plastic bag ordinance, and they were sued. And so we really looked at the ordinance language that had moved through other counties and cities and crafted our ordinance to follow that, to ensure that we wouldn't be met with any lawsuits. I would say that was the biggest challenge, was making sure that we put together something that had teeth and that was stringent and that would be effective, but not so. I mean, I think, maybe if we could ban any kind of plastic, that would be maybe the ultimate, but that wasn't feasible or realistic. And so getting the folks that would be affected to support your ordinance from the get-go is something I recommend.
I would say from DC's perspective, one of the concerns was the socioeconomic impact. That it could affect different neighborhoods and different businesses, and customers disproportionately. And really, that's something that we worked on, heavily prior, with the partnering with corporate sponsors to get reusable bags out there, to get to educate customers about why, and residents about why this is a positive change. And I would say that once it was passed, the significance of that survey that I mentioned really showed that across the board, both residents and businesses had pretty much neutral to positive views of the law. So those initial fears did not seem to really come to fruition.
And this is Jenny. I'll just add one last thing. I think that DC did a really great job of making the law about the river, like skip a bag, save the river. And so I think there, more than most places in the US, people really know the reason behind the law. And so I think that really helps, and that's something that other jurisdictions can learn from.
Okay, great. Okay, we're going to wrap up now. So again, this webinar, like all webinars in this series, has been recorded and will be made available via YouTube links on both the National Recycling Coalition and Recycling Market Center websites. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you again, Meri, Lillian, and Jennie, for your great presentations and input. And we hope you will all join us for next month's webinar. Please visit the NRC and RMC websites for schedule updates. And have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.